Shadow and State, The Life of Niccolò Machiavelli, read and published by Mr. Books. In the annals of human history, certain figures emerge whose names become synonymous with ideas, both revered and reviled. Among these, Niccolò Machiavelli occupies a special, shadowed corner, his image refracted through centuries of controversy, admiration, and misunderstanding. The very mention of his name conjures notions of cunning and ruthlessness, yet behind the mask of the infamous political theorist lies a man far more nuanced, a thinker shaped not only by the tumultuous currents of Renaissance Italy, but also by his unwavering curiosity, profound intellect, and persistent empathy for the fate of his city. Shadow and State, The Life of Machiavelli, seeks to peel back the layers of myth and legend, offering the reader a window into this captivating and conflicted figure. It is a journey not simply through Machiavelli's life, but through the vibrant streets and anxious courts of Florence, a city forever teetering between prosperity and peril. Here, amid bursts of cultural brilliance and relentless political intrigue, Machiavelli's story unfolds a narrative marked by the rise and fall of republics, the workings of statecraft, and the soul-searching despair of exile. To understand Machiavelli, one must walk beside him, as a young, sharp-eyed observer of the Republic, as an impassioned diplomat traversing the crumbling courts of Italy, as a fallen servant nursing wounds and aspirations in the quiet country air. We must sense his heartbreak and hope, his laughter and loneliness, as he seeks to reconcile the shadowy world of power with ideals of civic virtue. This book is an invitation to experience the world as Machiavelli saw it, not as a distant abstraction, but as a living, breathing landscape, fraught with uncertainty and possibility. Throughout the chapters that follow, we will explore not only the events that shape Machiavelli, but also the intricate connections between his circumstances, his famous writings, and his enduring legacy. By tracing the arc of his life from his humble beginnings in Florence to his twilight years, contemplating the fate of humanity, we seek to illuminate the man behind the Machiavellian legacy, the thinker who dared to gaze unflinchingly into the shadows in pursuit of truth. May this examination bring forth the empathy and understanding that has so often eluded one of history's most enigmatic minds. Let us embark, then, into the labyrinthine corridors of shadow and state, guided ever by the light of inquiry and imagination. Before we dive in, make sure to subscribe and hit that like button to support the channel. And don't forget to turn on the notification bell so you never miss an audiobook that could change your life. Now, let's begin. Enjoy. Chapter 1: Florentine Dawn, The Birth of a Thinker. Florence, at the twilight of the 15th century, was a city resplendent with the echoes of oratory, song, and commerce. Within its narrow cobbled streets, sunbeams fell against weathered stone, warming the facades of buildings that sheltered both artisans and the aspiring elite. This was a city alive with the clash of wealth and want, unmatched creativity, and sudden strife, the backdrop against which a child named Niccolò Machiavelli first opened his eyes in 1469. Born to a family of moderate means, but great ambition, Niccolò's early years were marked by both security and uncertainty. His father, Bernardo, a lawyer versed in Latin and the classics, ensured that the young Machiavelli encountered the written word with reverence. The Machiavelli home, though not grand, was one where books occupied an honored place. In the quiet hours of dusk, Niccolò listened as his father recited passages from Livy and Virgil, stories of heroism and ruin that sparked in him a fascination with the fate of states and the workings of destiny. Yet, outside those oak-lined rooms, Florence itself was an educator. The city pulsed with voices. Hawkers filled the marketplace near the baptistery. Artists debated color and form in shadowed workshops. Philosophers, followers of Marsilio Ficino, and the Platonic Academy shared their dreams of a harmonious, ordered world. It was here, among the pageantry and fierce competition of civic festivals, that Machiavelli first glimpsed the art of persuasion and the subtle manipulations that undergirded public life. In his youth, Machiavelli also witnessed the contradictions and instability that defined his city. Florence, ruled in a careful balance by the Medici family, was often shaken by plots, betrayals, and the ever-present threat of foreign intervention. The Pazzi conspiracy of 1478, a violent and dramatic attempt to unseat the Medici, left an indelible impression on the young Niccolò. He saw the consequences of ambition when unchecked by caution, and the cost to both the individual and the city when political structures faltered. Education played a central role in shaping Machiavelli's outlook. Under the tutelage of refined instructors, he absorbed not only the classics, but also the rudiments of mathematics, rhetoric, and logic. Every day, he honed his ability to read between the lines, to question motives and outcomes, to wrestle with the gap between ideals and realities. This early grounding in skepticism and analysis would become the foundation for the keen-eyed observer. He grew to be a man ever ready to probe beneath surface appearances in search of deeper truth. Behind the child's playful curiosity, a subtle empathy quietly blossomed. Observing the artisan's struggles and the pauper's resilience, Niccolò developed a sense of shared humanity that would later infuse his writings. Even as he learned the necessity of firmness and cunning in the world of power, he never lost sight of the suffering and striving that animated ordinary life. This tension between power and principle would become the axis on which his future thought turned. Family, too, left its mark. The Machiavellis, though not of aristocratic grandeur, valued honor and reputation. Niccolò saw in his parents an unwavering commitment to honesty and discipline, a code of conduct that guided them through unsteady times. It was a world where appearances sometimes mattered as much as truths, and where the lesson that every public act held consequence was tested daily. By the time Machiavelli reached adolescence, Florence's political and cultural transformations had already left their impressions carved deep into his consciousness. The city, set ablaze by the sermons of Savonarola and battered by wars with neighboring states, provided endless material for reflection and self-discovery. Machiavelli would carry these early images: the marble cold hands of saints, the roar of an angry crowd, the shiver of anticipation before a public vote, as a living anatomy of the state. Thus, the dawn of Niccolò Machiavelli was as much the story of a city as of a man. In Florence's light and shadow, amidst its turmoil and triumph, a mind was awakened, a mind poised to render the workings of power in words that would echo through the ages. Chapter 2. The Pulse of Power. Machiavelli's Political Awakening. For Machiavelli, youth soon gave way to engagement with the lifeblood of his city. The doors of Florence's palaces and courts, once distant and imposing, began to open as he entered the world, not only as a witness but as a participant. The collapse of the Medici regime in 1494 presented an unforeseen window for many ambitious citizens, and Machiavelli was one of those who sensed the winds of change. The expulsion of Piero de' Medici and the advent of the Florentine Republic created a crucible of political innovation and anxiety. It was during this epoch, with Florence scrambling to define itself anew, that Machiavelli found his calling. In 1498, at the age of 29, he was appointed to the Second Chancery, a crucial post for foreign correspondence and diplomatic missions. The modest yet significant role placed him at the heart of the government's efforts to assert and defend Florentine interests amidst larger, rivalrous powers. As Secretary to the Ten of War, Machiavelli immersed himself in the complexities of war and peace, friend and foe. He observed how alliances were made and unmade, how fortunes reversed within a heartbeat. It was a world of negotiation, subtle and raw, where the line between necessity and treachery could become blurred. Machiavelli's empathy, however, never wholly dissipated. While he understood the urgency of expediency, he could not suppress his awareness of the toll war levied on both leaders and the vulnerable. Travels played an essential part in Machiavelli's education in power. As an envoy, he crisscrossed Italy and beyond, engaging with kings and condottieri, popes and ambassadors. Each journey sharpened his radar for duplicity and sincerity. Every negotiation became a case study in the unstable chemistry of human desires. His encounters with the likes of Cesare Borgia, Louis XII of France, and Emperor Maximilian imparted hard lessons about ambition, ruthlessness, and the ever-changing face of statecraft. What set Machiavelli apart from many contemporaries was the clarity with which he recognized the distinction between appearance and reality. In his dispatches, we witness a mind unafraid to describe the world as it operated, not as it ought to be. His famously candid letters from the field dissected the hypocrisy and frailty that often undermined grand designs. Through such experiences, the shadowy foundations of politics became ever more visible to him, yet his reflections remained colored by an unmistakable empathy for the human factor. Amidst these trials, Machiavelli also encountered failure and frustration. Not all missions ended in triumph, not all promises bore fruit. He saw how fortune, capricious and cruel, could upend even the most careful plotting. These life lessons became the bedrock upon which his philosophical outlook was built, a recognition of unpredictability, the role of human agency, and the fragile nature of reputations. Despite the mounting pressure, there were moments of levity. Machiavelli's wit, sharp and self-deprecating, emerged as a survival tool. In the long hours spent composing reports or awaiting audiences, he composed satirical plays and exchanged warm correspondence with friends. These personal glimpses reveal a man both astutely political and intimately human, one who could laugh at life's absurdities, even as he lamented its cruelties. Empathy, once a quiet presence, grew into a more conscious force in Machiavelli's worldview. He never accepted power for power's sake, nor did his observations render him contemptuous. Instead, he sought to understand motives, the hopes and terrors that drove leaders and citizens alike. He respected the gravity of decisions made in the heart of the state, knowing well that they shaped the destinies of many. By the end of his first decade in office, Machiavelli had matured into a thinker of remarkable breadth. He had witnessed the dazzling spectrum of politics, its promise and peril, its kindness and cruelty. This period, vibrant and bruising, was the soil in which his most celebrated ideas began to germinate. In the pulse of Florentine power, Machiavelli discovered both the darkness and the dignity of statecraft, forging the insights that would, in time, reshape how generations understood the dance of shadow and state. Chapter 3. Within the Walls, Service to the Republic. Machiavelli's service to the Florentine Republic marked the zenith of his public career, a period in which duty and ambition wove a tapestry as intricate as any fresco lining the city's halls. From 1498 to 1512, he was not only a functionary, but a caretaker of the Republic's fragile vision, a vision constantly under threat from within and without. In those 14 years, Machiavelli's work would leave fingerprints on policies as diverse as military reform, diplomacy, and the everyday management of civic life. A primary challenge facing Florence was its defense. The city, lacking a standing army, relied for decades on mercenary forces unreliable, expensive, and often as dangerous as the enemy. Machiavelli, acutely aware that true independence was impossible without self-reliance, championed the establishment of a citizen militia. In lengthy memoranda and passionate council debates, he articulated his belief: only those with a true stake in the state's well-being could be trusted to defend it with courage and endurance. The creation of this militia was both an act of faith and a practical innovation. Machiavelli believed that the strength of a republic derived not from fear or force alone, but from the active engagement of its citizens. His efforts met resistance from oligarchs wary of losing control, from professional soldiers fearing obsolescence, but he pressed forward, convinced that Florence's future depended on the empowerment of its people. Diplomacy consumed as much of Machiavelli's energy as military reform. Time and again, he departed Florence, often on short notice, dispatched to negotiate with cities as varied as Rome, Venice, and the courts of foreign monarchs. He became a master of the balancing act, honest yet guarded, hopeful yet steeled against disillusionment. Nowhere was this more evident than in his dealings with Caesar Borgia, a man who embodied the paradoxes of power, inspiring both admiration and dread. These experiences reinforced Machiavelli's conviction that effective governance was an exercise in practical wisdom. Laws and institutions mattered profoundly, but the character of those who ruled mattered more. In his memoranda to the Signoria, he advocated for policies that balance boldness with prudence, always alert to the tempest-shifting alliances or the latent dangers lurking within seemingly secure arrangements. Within the walls of his city, Machiavelli grappled with contradictions endemic to republican life. Florence was a city of ferocious debate, where eloquence could be both a weapon and a shield. Machiavelli himself was often embroiled in the turbulence of factional struggle, defending republican ideals, even as he acknowledged their precarious footing. Yet he found in this chaos a kind of beauty, a testament to the restless energy that drove Florence's greatest achievements. Personal cost accompanied public service. The strains of office were magnified by suspicion and rivalry. Every decision was scrutinized for hidden meaning, every rumor amplified. In the margins of his official reports, Machiavelli sometimes confessed his exhaustion, the weariness born not just from work, but from the burden of caring deeply for his city's fate. Still, he did not give in to cynicism. Instead, he cultivated a quiet resilience, finding solace in family life, lively dinners with friends, and the solace of literature. These brief interludes reminded Machiavelli of what politics could never provide: the warmth of belonging, the grounding simplicity of love and laughter. He saw more clearly than most that no amount of power could substitute for genuine connection. Service transformed Machiavelli. In the echo of council chambers and the clatter of martial preparations, he learned the cost and the value of commitment. He came to see the state not just as an abstraction, but as a living fabric, delicate yet enduring, demanding both vigilance and hope. The lessons gleaned within Florence's walls would serve him in exile and inspire the bold, unvarnished wisdom of the works he would write when denied a place in the city's governance. Thus, in service to the Republic, the mark of Machiavelli was etched deep into the history of Florence and into the body of his enduring thought, a testament to the passionate, empathetic soul who believed that even in the shadows, the state could aspire toward light. Chapter 4. Beneath the Medici Shadow, Exile and Reflection. It was in the chilling silence of exile that Niccolò Machiavelli truly met himself. Bereft of office, status, and even the simple company of political confidants, he wandered through a landscape transformed by Medici vengeance. In Florence, where once his decisions resonated through marble halls and bustling squares, his very name now inspired suspicion and contempt. The Medici family's return to power in 1512 was as swift as it was absolute. Their exile at the hands of the French was but a memory, now avenged with the banishment of those who had served the Republic so devotedly. Machiavelli, having been secretary to the Second Chancery and a trusted hand in both diplomacy and defense, was among the first to fall. Dragged from his post, he soon faced suspicion of conspiracy, an accusation that led to his arrest and torture in the stone bowels of Florence's government palace. Released more out of Medici politicking than true exoneration, he was exiled to the austere serenity of his family's farm at Sant'Andrea in Percussina, far from the city's pulse. Isolation forced Machiavelli to confront the shadow within the ache for relevance, the pain of abandonment, and the humiliation of reduced means. He was no longer privy to the machinations of power. Instead, he tilled the land and conversed with peasants. Yet, in this barren soil, seeds of new insight sprouted. Evenings found him robed in his best garments, retreating into his study to commune with the ancients. In his stillness, he wrote letters to friends such as Francesco Vettori, their correspondence vibrant with wit and the ache of longing for city, for conversation, for importance. Exile also sharpened his vision. Removed from the immediate tumult, he now observed politics as if through a prism. The violence, treachery, and brilliance of the era crystallized before him. In his enforced solitude, Machiavelli's thoughts turned to the mechanics of power itself. What enabled a man or a state to command destiny? Was virtue a mask worn by the successful, or something more elusive? How could Florence reclaim liberty in the face of princely might? Stripped of illusions, Machiavelli began the intellectual work that would shape history. In rough script, he drafted treatises not only on war and political theory, but on comedy, history, and philosophy. Exile was a desolate companion, but also a liberator from the daily entanglements of government service. It allowed honest confrontation with defeat, which, paradoxically, nurtured the fertile ground from which his most significant contributions soon bloomed. Perhaps most poignantly, his letters express longing not simply for power, but for the rich tapestry of civic life. The clamor of the city, the urgent exchanges, the chance to serve a greater purpose, all had vanished. Yet instead of succumbing to bitterness, Machiavelli's self-awareness grew. In his sadness, he found clarity. "I am rotting away," he confessed to a friend. But what was decaying was not only his ambition, but also the illusions that had shielded him from his own vulnerability. The Medici shadow, at first a source of torment, became a catalyst for transformation. As Machiavelli watched from afar, Florence itself struggled beneath Medici rule, its creative and political energies stifled, its memory of the Republic growing faint. Machiavelli's own heart ached not merely from personal loss, but from the defeat of the dream for a just and virtuous communal life. In this dual exile, both personal and civic, he began to distill the hard truths that would echo through his masterworks. Thus, in the shadow of the Medici, Machiavelli wrestled with what it meant to be both powerless and clear-eyed. He would never again serve in public office. But from the silence and pain of exile, he began to give voice, through pen and parchment, to questions that would reverberate far beyond his farmhouse solitude. The Medici shadow, in all its chill and condemnation, became the unlikely womb for a new kind of understanding, one that would not only survive his lifetime, but forever challenge the world to see both power and its absence in a more honest light. Chapter 5. The Pen and the Sword, Crafting the Prince. Amid the rolling hills and cypress groves of his enforced retreat, Machiavelli's daily life was divided between the dullness of agricultural labor and the intellectual ferment that would shape destiny. He churned earth by day and by night, retreated to his study, where, with trembling candor, he laid down words that would shock the conscience of Europe. The prince was not born of privilege, but of deprivation, crafted as much from the desperation of a forgotten official as from the insight of a relentless analyst. Machiavelli wrote with the urgency of a man denied audience with his age. In the cool hours of dusk, he donned robes that lent dignity to his solitary work, immersing himself in the tomes of Livy, Tacitus, and the chroniclers of ancient Rome. Yet if his sources were classical, his gaze was fixed unflinchingly on the present. Florence impoverished, prey for armies and ambitions from Spain, France, and the papacy. Italy fragmented and vulnerable. At the heart of the prince is empathy disguised as severity. Machiavelli did not advocate cruelty for its own sake, but neither did he flinch from hard truths. The world, as he saw it, was unkind to the innocent and often rewarded those who understood the rules beneath its mask of morality. It is better to be feared than loved, he wrote, not because he craved tyranny, but because he saw love's fickleness and how easily fortune deserted the ill-prepared. Princes, for Machiavelli, must be architects of their own fates. Yet his writing is as much a mirror as a manual. Through its famed maxims and warnings, he prods rulers to self-awareness. He shows the dangers of indecision, the perils in misplaced trust, and how necessary it is to be both fox in cunning and lion in strength. While his contemporaries dreamed of ideal republics or divine right, Machiavelli asked instead, what actually succeeds in the dirty theatre of politics? In this, he granted his reader a rare gift, the permission to look at power without flinching, to see its machinery, and to judge leaders not only by their intentions, but by their outcomes. He wrote too from longing. Exiled from the hallways of government, Machiavelli hoped to catch the Medici's gaze, to reclaim relevance by offering them counsel. This little book, he wrote in a dedication to Lorenzo de' Medici, ought to be welcome to you, coming as it does from one who has long tested the affairs of state. But the gift was met with silence. If Machiavelli's prose shocked, it was not because it revealed what men had never done, but because it revealed what was always done and rarely confessed. The Prince was as much a work of psychology as of policy. It emerges from the author's aching empathy for those who fail for heroes and republics, undone by misplaced faith or unresolved conflict. He grieved for Florence, seeing in every maxim the echo of its lost hopes. In peeling away illusions, Machiavelli hoped to armor future leaders so that another catastrophe, like the fall of Florentine liberty, might never come to pass. Through all its severity, the Prince bears a lyric melancholy. Its pages sing of opportunity and catastrophe, of the human longing to control chaos, and the ceaseless, wrenching uncertainty that defines both life and statecraft. When Machiavelli advises that sometimes necessity must override morality, he writes not with triumph, but with resignation. His compassion is harsh, but authentic, a hard-won wisdom born from watching too many good men fall. By the time he completed The Prince, Machiavelli had given the world a work that was both an indictment and a plea. He tells every reader, ruler or commoner, that honesty about power, its what, its how, and its why is the only path to true understanding. He wrote, not to undermine virtue, but to anchor it in reality, so it might survive the storms of history. It was a prayer for a Florence and a world that might someday be strong enough to reconcile ambition with justice. Chapter 6. Between Ambition and Despair. Machiavelli's later years. The passing years of exile did not fade Machiavelli's ambitions, but altered their color. No longer the restless envoy or the energetic secretary navigating embassies and councils, Machiavelli became more introspective, his wit edged with a bittersweet softness. Time and the persistent shadow of exclusion forced him to remake himself, building, in the quiet of his farm, a legacy that would outlast any office. Life in Sant'Andrea was a rhythm of compromise. Machiavelli managed the estate, a task at once tedious and humbling for a man who once dictated policy to rulers. He rose each morning before dawn, supervising ploughmen, arguing accounts, fencing off the encroaching wilds from his vineyards. Duty to his family, especially his beloved wife Marietta, grounded him. Their letters show warmth and patience underpinned by mutual worry for a precarious future. Yet the pull of the city, of politics, never released its grip. Machiavelli sought every excuse for return. He submitted treatises, wrote comedies that lampooned the ruling class, and busied himself with local affairs. The disappointment of being overlooked by the Medici was a wound that never fully healed. His ambitious overtures, letters offering advice, dedications, even allegorical fables, went largely ignored. Still, his mind was restless. During these years, Machiavelli composed some of his most profound works. Discourses on Livy stands as a great mirror to the prince, an exploration of republican government, civic virtue, and the dynamics that allow free states to thrive and endure. Where the prince scrutinized leadership from above, the discourses considered the people, the mechanisms of law, and the sometimes reckless genius of the collective. Through these pages, he argued that conflict, even civil strife, could serve the health of a republic, so long as it was harnessed by wise laws and broad participation. These writings were not received with the impact Machiavelli hoped. The Medici Republic was cautious, its rulers wary of even a whiff of republican nostalgia. More and more, Machiavelli became a relic, brilliant but inconvenient to the powers that be. His comedies found small stages, his histories, noble patrons, but always the recognition for which he longed appeared just beyond reach. A shimmering promise displaced by suspicion. Despite disappointment, Machiavelli cultivated friendship and wit. He corresponded with scholars, statesmen, artists, and poets, building a lively social life within the confines of exile. Guests at his home remarked upon the spark in his eye, the constant banter, his wild stories drawn from diplomacy's frontiers. Even as he aged, Machiavelli retained an irrepressible energy, one leavened by nostalgia, but never conquered by defeat. And yet, the specter of despair loomed. The threat of penury never wholly faded. Political rehabilitation never arrived. Letters from these years are often tinged with a gentle melancholy. Machiavelli could jest about his misfortune, once quipping that he was making shoes for the wedding of a bishop to describe pointless labor, but beneath it ran anxiety for his family's well-being and for Florence's future. Still, the synthesis of ambition and disappointment yielded a rare wisdom. Machiavelli became not only a chronicler of his era, but of all times marked by instability and the cruel indifference of fortune. He understood the price of hope, the limits of principle, and the ache of loving a city that could neither reward nor trust him. Where others might have surrendered to bitterness, Machiavelli sharpened his empathy. His satire became more piercing, his insights deeper. He watched as young, untested rulers cast about for certainties, while the city he loved drifted, unmoored by its own confusions. In the final years, as Florence's fate seesawed between Medici and foreign influence, Machiavelli's health declined. Sensing that his time was short, he poured his energies into completing his histories and plays. He clung to the hope that, if not in this life, then in the annals of memory, his vision would be vindicated. On June 21, 1527, Niccolò Machiavelli died, unattended by state and largely ignored by those in power. Only a small circle marked his passing. Yet, as the cypress trees whispered over Sant'Andrea, the world had lost a spirit, relentless in its search for truth, a man whose failures became fodder for the wisdom our own age still desperately needs. Chapter 7. Echoes in the Corridors. The Legacy of Machiavelli. With Machiavelli's death, a quiet fell upon Florence. His name briefly mourned, and then mostly forgotten by a city preoccupied with its next upheaval. Yet, what the Medici, and even Machiavelli's contemporaries, could not see was how the seemingly insignificant efforts of one exiled servant would reverberate through the glass corridors of history, not as the echo of a failure, but as the prelude to an entirely new conception of politics. In the years after his death, Machiavelli's manuscripts circulated quietly. Some read the prints and recoiled at its candor. Others found in his discourses a new vocabulary for liberty. The Church, threatened by his fearless proscription of morality as optional for rulers, soon placed his works on the index of forbidden books. Yet condemnation could not still curiosity. In courts from France to England, and later in revolutionary circles from America to Russia, Machiavelli's ideas gained ever wider currency, fueling both tyrants' ambition and libertarians' resolve. His reputation was not kind. Machiavellian entered many languages as an epithet for deceit, a mark of the arch-manipulator. Yet such caricatures fail to grasp the full man. His genius lay in seeing the full spectrum of human capacity in governments and in the hearts of citizens. He knew virtue could serve the Commonwealth, but only if it was armed against corruption. He understood that law was not merely a code, but a bulwark against chaos, maintained not by hopes, but by the careful balancing of fear, ambition, and honor. Over centuries, thinkers have wrestled with Machiavelli's shadow. Jean-Jacques Rousseau, Montesquieu, and the American founders all argued both with and through Machiavelli's ideas, whether about the nature of liberty, the structure of republics, or the necessary safeguards against tyranny. Even those who abhorred his conclusions admitted sometimes with grudging respect that he had forced a clarity upon political life. No longer could theory content itself with abstraction. Machiavelli demanded results. He forced the world to ask, does your idealism survive reality, or does it shatter in the machinations of human frailty? Writers, too, have found in Machiavelli a source of tragic inspiration. Shakespeare's villains quoted him. Voltaire mocked, yet admired him. Modern-day playwrights, filmmakers, and political thinkers employ his language as shorthand for humanity's ceaseless dance with power. Yet, through each distortion, the truth endures. Machiavelli was not the champion of evil, but its analyst and often its reluctant foe. For Machiavelli's greatest legacy is not simply a toolkit for ruler or rebel, but a challenge to honesty. He reminds us that to govern is to make choices, some regrettable, some essential. To truly serve a people, one must see the forces shaping behavior, the limits of virtue, and the irreducible complexities of collective life. Beyond politics, Machiavelli's legacy is personal. His letters, comedies, and histories reveal a human heart wounded, insecure, playful, and desperate for acceptance. He finds kinship in every outsider's pain, encouragement for every idealist marred by compromise, and warning for every leader dazzled by easy slogans. He is the voice urging us to tolerate ambiguity, to accept that justice and expedience do not always align, and to return again and again to the question, for whose good do we govern, and at what cost? Florence may have silenced Machiavelli in his lifetime, but history gave him an audience beyond imagining. Today, his shadow is everywhere, in boardrooms, in city halls, in the restless conscience of every citizen tasked with choosing between the tempting simplicity of dogma and the relentless complications of reality. Much maligned, never ignored, Machiavelli's voice continues to echo soft but unyielding through all the corridors where power is brokered, lost, and sometimes, just sometimes, wielded for the common good. Chapter 8. Shadows on the state relevance in the modern world. In the quiet dimness of Machiavelli's study centuries ago, the anxieties and ambitions that shaped his words were not so different from those that haunt the corridors of power today. The legacy of his thought, carved in the hard stone of necessity, continues to cast a long shadow over the contemporary state. In the modern world, where ideologies shift with alarming speed, where leaders confront unending crises, Machiavelli's truths feel less distant, more urgent. Yet, how do we reconcile the Renaissance world with our own, and what truly have we inherited from Florence's elusive son? The echoes of Machiavelli's teachings resound first in the pragmatic embrace of reality by modern political minds. As leaders navigate the tumult of international relations, economic uncertainty, and societal polarization, they instinctively grasp what Machiavelli defined 5 centuries ago. Politics is not governed by ideals alone, but by the unpredictable movement of fortune and the stubborn realities of human nature. The notion of vert, the ability to adapt, to seize opportunity, to mold fate lest it mold you, remains central, a testament to Machiavelli's enduring lens through which to view the art of governance. Yet Machiavelli's influence is not uncontroversial. His name is invoked as both a warning and a manual for those for whom the ends may justify the means. In the language of policymakers, Machiavellian realism often serves as a rationalization for harsh decisions necessary. It is argued when the fate of the state is at stake. But Machiavelli himself was painfully aware of the costs embedded in such choices. His prose is not that of the unfeeling plotter, but of a man deeply affected by the chaos and unpredictability of his era, striving desperately for stability, for order, even as he understood the price it might exact on both rulers and the ruled. Nowhere is Machiavelli's presence more sharply felt than in debates over leadership and ethics. From corporate boardrooms to the chambers of government, his warnings about the dangers of complacency and the necessity of calculated risk echo still. In a time defined by information overload, public scrutiny, and shifting values, the Machiavellian question, "What ought a leader do for the good of their people?" bears profound weight. Whether in the crisis rooms of pandemic response, the delicate maneuvering of peace negotiations, or the hard choices required by economic recession, modern leaders face the same paradox as Machiavelli's prince, to act in the shadowy space between principle and expediency. Yet, in the heart of Machiavelli's shadow lies not cynicism, but a complicated form of hope. To read him carefully is to see a thinker who yearned above all for a community at peace with itself, for a republic strong enough to endure misfortune, capable of renewal. His republican spirit, so vibrant in his lesser-known works, calls out for civic engagement and mutual responsibility. If we remember Machiavelli only as the author of The Prince, the cold analyst of power, we miss the deeper river running beneath his thought, that states, and those who lead them, are ultimately accountable to their people and to history. In reflection, Machiavelli's relevance today depends as much on the questions he forces us to ask as on the answers he provides. How much compromise is too much? Does necessity excuse all? Where does the line fall between prudence and cruelty, between the self-interest of the state and the good of humanity? The world of surveillance, corporate lobbying, populist resurgence, and globalized anxiety is far more complex than anything Machiavelli could have imagined. And yet the tensions he explored persist. Why do we still read Machiavelli? The answer perhaps lies not in the grim comfort of his realism, but in the restless humanism of his doubts. He shows us that power is neither wholly good nor wholly evil, but always contingent, always negotiated, forever pursued with hope and fear entwined. The modern machinations of states, be they democratic or authoritarian, are lit from within by the same flame. The desire for security, for continuity, for the possibility of greatness amidst chaos. As we step into the uncertain dawns of our own time, to walk the path Machiavelli trod is to accept the ambiguity, to hold both ambition and empathy in our hands. It is to recognize the shadows on the state, not as omens of despair, but as signposts pointing toward vigilance, humility, and the relentless pursuit of understanding. Machiavelli's legacy endures, not because he betrayed the ideals of his age, but because he saw, with painful clarity, the cost of utopia, yet dared to hope for a better republic all the same. In the shadows, we find not only warnings, but also the courage to seek light. If you found this video helpful, inspiring, or entertaining, don't forget to hit that like button. And if you're new here, make sure to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss out on future content. Your support means the world. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below.